Hi, I'm Nora Whittington with the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region. Our immigration partnership is one of approximately 80 across Canada. The goal of an immigration partnership is to ensure the successful integration of immigrants and refugees in Waterloo Region. Our goal is to look at housing, healthcare, English language, employment, and the true sense of belonging that we hope immigrants and refugees will have in our community. Our goal is to ensure that we can connect employers to immigrant and refugee talent in our region. And we partner with the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce to ensure that we can reach employers and share our message and be an ambassador for our community. We are really pleased to be able to support the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce on various initiatives, including these webinars. So welcome today.
I'm here today to talk to you about finding purpose. And before we get started, I just wanted to say I thought we should give them all a round of applause, and the folks at Tapestry Hall. Beautiful event. So I have to confess something to you. Until 2 years ago, I really didn't think too much about my health or the topic of women's health at all. I certainly never thought of myself as being any kind of an advocate or a feminist, for that matter. See, I'd always been healthy. I took no medications. I'm really lucky. I'd only really been inside the hospital to have a couple of babies. And then I experienced the unthinkable. I was hit with a health crisis. And let me tell you, it really opened my eyes, and I'm here today to share a little bit of what I've heard and learned. So I'm going to start with a quote from the goddess that we all admire, Oprah, who says, "Turn your wounds into wisdom." I believe that that's not only true, it is possible. And sometimes, and I'm sure this is a line we've heard before, that what doesn't break us or kill us will make us stronger. So let me just back up a little bit, though, before I get too deep into philosophical stuff. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and how it has ignited a passion in me to do better for women out there. See, life's kind of a funny thing. You know, it's amazing that purpose can sometimes be found at the ripe old age of now 59, and it can be found in the most extraordinary of circumstances that at the time was actually really quite soul-crushing and probably what I thought was the worst thing that ever could have happened to me. I'm going to share a photo here. This is a little vulnerable. This is me. I think it was May the 30th of 2022. It's the day before I was having my mastectomy, and I was going to be going in for my very first surgery ever to have my breast amputated. That sounds really grim. Really, I'm not actually that grim a person. But let me tell you a little bit about my breast cancer diagnosis. Because again, I had said I was super healthy, I was fit, in great shape, I ate healthy, I did everything right. I had no family history of breast cancer, but I found a lump. And that took me to the doctor. And at the time, she thought, well, maybe it's just a cyst. That's always the hope, of course. But we pressed forward. I had had a mammogram booked anyways, so we turned it into a diagnostic mammogram. And I went to Freeport and had my exam and grabbed some lunch and came home. And I remember my doctor saying to me, if I call, there's a concern. If I email you, you're going to be fine. So I was on a call. I had just come back from Freeport, ate my lunch, on a call with a client, and the phone starts ringing. And it was a masked number. And then and then the number came up again, and it was my doctor's office. And so I rushed the client off the phone and went to answer, only to find out that they stopped answering the phones at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was Thursday. The voicemail from my doctor said she would not be in until Monday, so I had to wait, knowing that I had a cancer diagnosis. So I was diagnosed at that point, and the next 4 weeks were just absolutely crushing. I've never experienced anxiety like that in my life. I couldn't get off the floor. I would walk around with cold water bottles on my chest, just trying to calm the parasympathetic nerve. Anyways, I won't get into too much detail, but let's put it this way. I was now, the healthcare system now owned my ass for the next 256 days of my life. I ended up having a double mastectomy. After surgery, they found that in the pathology, the cancer had crept into my lymph nodes, so I ended up with 12 weeks of chemotherapy. I am now the quintessential poster child for chemo curls. and I had 15 rounds of radiation finishing in November of 2022. It was a journey. And what was interesting as I sort of made the choices I did, so one of the changes I think, or one of the choices that I made that I think was a little puzzling for my friends and family and even the doctors that cared for me, is I chose not to have breast mound reconstruction. I chose to stay flat. And at the time when I made that decision, there were sort of two things that I was concerned about. One was I didn't want to lose my fitness ability, because that was a real mental health coping mechanisms for me. And the other was, what happens to my closet packed full of clothing? Would I ever be able to wear any of them again? And I got fired up. And at this point, this was the one hill that I was fighting on, and I wrote an article, I wrote an op-ed for the Globe and Mail saying that I was unashamedly flat, and that I wasn't going to hide in the corner or pretend that my life was over or pretend to be something that I was not. And I was astounded by the reaction. People were writing me from all over the country. They were finding my email, they were coming in through LinkedIn, and I was just overwhelmed. And women were saying, thank you so much for speaking for us. That I had no idea that I was going to hit this kind of a feminist nerve, and it suddenly sparked in me this thought that I needed to do more, and that there was a bigger issue around women's health. Primarily, we are not small men. You'd be surprised, the healthcare system seems to think we are. Women make up 50% of the population, and yet, as I've gone on this exploration and I have journeyed forward, I've come to understand that gender inequality in healthcare is really quite shocking. I'm going to give you some numbers, and excuse me for sitting at the podium because I've got a bunch of data that I need to kind of read off here, and I haven't got it all memorized. This is a Lancet Commission report called Women, Power and Cancer. It's by Ophelia Ginsberg. She's actually a Canadian working for Lancet. So in this recent report, it talks about 5.3 million adults under the age of 70-year-old have died of cancer in 2020, and 2.3 million of them are women. Cancer ranks as one of the top 3 causes of premature mortality amongst women in all countries of the world. 1.5 million deaths could be averted through better primary prevention and early detection strategies, while a further 800,000 deaths could be averted if women everywhere could access optimal cancer care. The patriarchy, you see, and here's the feminist coming out in me, dominates cancer care. It determines our research and our policy making, and those in positions of power, who are often male still, decide what is prioritized, funded, studied, and screened. And there'll be a little bit more on that later. Women screened worldwide, and this is not just cancer, this is from Hologic, which is a billion-dollar brand that actually, manufactures mammograms, but it's not a name I knew before. They looked at testing for major health conditions and realized that they are extremely low. This was data that was presented at Davos this year. Most women do not receive key tests in the past 12 months. That means billions of women are going untested for potentially life-threatening conditions. Just absolutely shocking. Only 36% are tested for high blood pressure, a major risk factor. 19% are tested for diabetes, again, a leading cause of death in women. 11% of women worldwide are tested for any type of cancer. And 10% were tested for only 10% were tested for sexually transmitted diseases and infections, leaving 2 billion women of reproductive age at risk of infertility, increased maternal and fetal mortality, and deadly diseases. It's only since 1993 that women have been included in pharmaceutical clinical trials. So the drugs that we take today, we are often over-medicated, and the drugs were all developed and designed for men and men's physiology. Even today, women only make up 34% of phase 1 clinical trials in the FDA-approved drugs between the years of 2013 and 2015. Sorry, I'm laying a lot of data on you. Medical gaslighting is a thing. doctors tend to dismiss women's health concerns. We heard a little bit of this in terms of the menopause presentation earlier today. They chalk it up to stress, anxiety, mental health illnesses. There's an analysis of 1.3 million patients carried over a 12-year period, and that was recently released by academics at the University of Toronto. It was a comprehensive survey of 21 different types of surgeries, and it found that in Ontario, women are 15% more likely to suffer a bad outcome, and a third more likely that the operation will have fatal consequences when a man performs, when a man, rather a woman, carries out that procedure. And women that are operated on by men had a 16% increase in major complications post-surgery and are 11% more likely to be readmitted. This goes on. I won't bore you with too many more data, but this goes on for pain-related issues, cardiovascular-related issues. Women's health is underrepresented and dismissed. Let me talk a little bit more about breast cancer. It's more acute for women of color and the LGBT community members. They face additional levels of discrimination. I want to also talk to you, and I mentioned I would go back to this on screening, but this is really important news for all of us right now because we are about a month away from the Canadian Preventative Health Task Force coming forward with a decision on when screening will begin for women. They determine at a federal level the screening policies for everything from colorectal cancer to pancreatic to cervical to breast to prostate. And the committee is firmly entrenched that screening should begin at 50. And there have been movements afoot to bring that screening age down to 40 because women are developing cancers earlier. We don't expect the task force to change their mind, and they still have tremendous influence over family doctors. So it is going to be vitally important for women in this room and for you to tell your sisters, your friends, your daughters that they need to fight for themselves. Now, the provinces are moving toward 40 as a screening age, but again, the federal Preventative Health Task Force does have the ear of family physicians, and unfortunately, many women will present to their physician with a concern only to be denied screening. This flies in the face of the trends worldwide. The United States, the FDA is actually moving its screening from 50 to 40. And part of the reason for that is the racial inequality that exists. You see, black women tend to develop breast cancer in a more aggressive form, and they develop it earlier. And so if they're not being screened until the age of 40, those cancers are not being found until they are later and they are more advanced, which means the mortality for black women is higher as a result. And sorry, just lost my way. I get a little emotional about this. So we also know that cancer is being diagnosed at a much earlier stage. And for those younger women in their 20s and 30s, there is nothing available to them in terms of screening. So all they have is their voice and their advocacy. The other interesting sort of issue around misogyny and paternalism as it relates to me, a proud flatty, as that's what we call ourselves. We're actually a very joyous bunch, by the way. We like to wander around without our tops on and beaches and forests. It's a little strange, but... or in my case, People magazine. That one nearly got me divorced. But 25% of women who opt to go flat will actually be told by they will experience pushback by their surgeons. Although 75% of women who do decide not to opt for breast reconstruction are very content with their decision, but surgeons continue to persist and to reinforce this sort of false ideal that, you know, if you don't have breasts, you are not feminine. And in fact, just recently I was back to see my oncology team, and I always offer the opportunity for them to actually do a physical exam because many have not seen a flat closure. And the doctor, who was a female, asked me how I was dealing with my loss of femininity. Yeah. But then she turned around and said she'd probably do the same, so I'm like, well, okay, whatever. Probably one of the most despicable things in working in the Flaty community that women with mastectomies have to deal with is that doctors do not take a great deal of care in doing any kind of plastic surgery closure on these women. So there are women that are just left absolutely mutilated and devastated. Or even in a more vile situation, the surgeon will actually overrule their wishes while they are asleep on the table, leaving them with excess skin because they may want to change their mind a little later. And so these are the battles that we continue to fight. It's still not new information. Look, see, I got so carried away, I went through my slides and I didn't even move on. I'm going to talk just a little bit because we've already dealt with the topic of menopause, but I just wanted to address a little bit sort of the 3 M's of women's health, which are menstruation, maternity, and menopause. As we heard this morning, it's not talked about enough, especially in the workplace. It's really important, and I have some of the same data that was used, that women in the workplace don't feel comfortable talking about menstruation, or don't feel comfortable admitting that they may be leaving the workplace or taking a sick day because they are having cramps or some difficulties. And certainly as a menopausal woman, I actually joke and say, well, I liked it so much the first time, I took some drugs to give me menopause again. So we know that women face tremendous issues with respect to menopause. I'm going to move forward a little bit and talk a little bit about cancer in the workplace, because we have employers here, and I think it's an important topic. When you've got either are experiencing a health crisis at work, or have an employee that is experiencing a health crisis at work. And I heard in a group that I belonged to the other day, a woman that has just recently finished chemotherapy, and her employer is forcing her back to work if she doesn't show up within 5 days, she's going to face consequences. So 1 in 2 Canadians, and this is pretty sobering when we look around the room, and I feel like I'm like the university professor saying, look to your right and look to your left. One of you will not be here at the end of the class, but 1 in 2 Canadians will experience cancer in their lifetime. 1 in 8 women are going to experience a breast cancer diagnosis in their lifetime. And we've just heard cancer is going to happen, is happening younger and younger for both men and women, and it's cancers of all types. So for employers and managers in the audience, here's what you need to know. Expect to be in for the long haul. As I mentioned, my journey, and I got off easy, was 256 days. It's not like you can bring your date book out when the oncologist calls and says, well, let me just flip through and see when I'm available. You go when you are summoned. Chemotherapy obviously has side effects associated with it, fatigue, physical changes. Some people are very, very ill with it, and so they can't necessarily be expected to work. And there's no negotiation with radiation. That is a daily journey. So you have typically anywhere from, it could be 5 to 20 rounds of radiation, and you have to be there daily. And I was just talking to a woman who has an hour-long commute to the hospital, so that sort of 30-minute appointment for radiation, which is just, it really is an in and out, but for her it's going to be a 2-hour undertaking to drive to that location. The other thing that that we should be aware of is that, the trauma doesn't end when the treatment ends. In fact, that's typically when the trauma sets in. I remember banging the gong myself and finishing radiation and sort of jumping up and down with glee. My husband and I walked out to the car and I burst into tears. It was like the first time that suddenly it had hit me and what I'd been through. And so the trauma continues. It will always, cancer changes you forever. It's the club you can't escape from. And so you will always somewhat be looking over your shoulder and waiting for the next shoe to drop. So as an employer, just know that this is what you're dealing with, that these people are emotionally changed forever. For those of you who want to get behind breast cancer, that's fantastic, but breast cancer happens 365 days a year, not just 1 month of the year. And although I'm wearing pink today, I just happen to like pink, but pink can be actually quite a triggering color. And so beware as an employer of doing virtue signaling and showcasing or tokenizing some kind of support for cancer. Genuinely put your efforts and support behind it. Know that the people that are part of your universe who are dealing with cancer, they and their families may be financially struggling. So doing a fundraiser for individuals and directly supporting them versus sort of laundering your money through another organization may be a way to go. Revisit your drug plan. I was shocked. I'm self-employed, and I was shocked. I had to take an injection after every chemotherapy appointment to keep my white blood count high. And I remember getting the call from the pharmacist who said, you do know that this needle is $1,200. And I was like, holy crap. So there are some drug sort of companionship type programs available. I was absolutely shocked the other day that I have quite a number of young women I know that are on a drug called Verzenio. It costs $15,000 a month. And the provincial government is not, at this point, providing any kind of compensation for drugs that people need to take for life-saving reasons. So that is another battle that we are fighting. So how do I get to purpose? I laid a lot of data on you, but I just want to tell you that, and this is going to sound really strange, but I look back on the last 2 years with tremendous amount of gratitude. Cancer was obviously one of the worst things I thought could ever happen to me, and it has turned into one of the most gift-giving things ever. I got behind, a friend of mine gifted me a book on Stoicism. I don't know if any of you follow it. There's 2 principles of Stoicism. One is memento mori, which means everyone dies. Couldn't quite get behind that. But the other principle is called amor fati. This is Latin for the words accept your fate or love your fate. And I actually carried a coin with me throughout my diagnosis of that, and I've now passed it on to another friend of mine whose brother is struggling with cancer, and he's carrying it. But the idea of just accepting any moment that you're in and looking at life as a gift and looking at it as an opportunity for growth. So I didn't wake up, the morning after my surgery saying, geez, Ellyn, let's become an activist and an advocate for women's health and cancer. No, it wasn't anything like that, but it was rather an evolutionary thing. And again, it certainly was triggered by the Globe and Mail and the response that I received. But then I also decided, well, Ellyn, you're never going to be bald again. Let's go document it. So I called a photographer friend of mine, and we did this amazing photo shoot. I love this one. I look like a spider. I wanted to recapture and celebrate who I was now. I was a different person. I had a different body. I looked different. I felt different. And I wanted to celebrate this sense of femininity that I found in myself, a self-conscious girl who never would have gone forth in life without makeup on and was always dressed to the T. And, here I was, taking my top off, celebrating my scars, bald as a billiard ball. But when life strips you of your breasts, your hair, your eyelashes, your eyebrows, you suddenly realize what really matters and how really powerful and strong and what beauty is. And so beauty comes from the inside. And it just made me want to share that with the world, share it with other women, and be part of the change. But I didn't stop here. I've been busy over the last 2 years, just saying. As I mentioned, 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with cancer. And I wanted them not to feel alone. I felt so alone and so bewildered. I felt like I was the only one in the world that had experienced the diagnosis, and I was shattered by it, even though I knew women that had been through it, and they reached out to hold my hand, and I wanted to do the same. So I wrote a book. I thumb-typed it during chemotherapy while I was hepped up on steroids, laying in bed at night, writing chapters. At one point, I am a storyteller, and it just flowed out of me. And so at one point, I was still in chemotherapy here in Cambridge. And the oncologist, I've run out of material because I had actually run into myself on the journey. I had told all the stories, and I was at this point where I was like, okay. She's just, oh, don't worry, we'll give you more material. So I wrote this book, which I launched on Amazon. People seem to like it, that I haven't paid. And then I got involved in this absolutely remarkable project called I Want You to Know with the photographer that did my images. We wanted again to celebrate the humanity that is breast cancer and the diversity of it, because I think there's so much imagery out there of the, Caucasian white woman, 50 years old, that's sort of the poster child for breast cancer. And so we assembled, and it was a big project, all volunteer. We assembled 31 individuals of all different nationalities and races and genders. We had Warren, who has male breast cancer. We had Spencer, who's not on this wheel, but Spencer is a proud trans male. And we wanted to represent the full spectrum of cancer. And what that taught me was that cancer is still, in talking with many of the women who are of traditional culture or black culture, it's that cancer is actually still regarded by many in society as a shameful diagnosis. And that just shocked me, but it's absolutely true. And I will pay tribute. We had 31 individuals, and we had portraits released every day during the month of October. You can see it online. If you just Google I Want You to Know and Dense Breast Canada, you can go and see the portraits and read the stories. We did lose one of our 31. So Stephanie was ill at the time. She was 39. She left little children, and we launched this portrait series on the 26th of October, and she died on November the 7th. So, but again, I'm still busy. I then, sort of in a weird twist of fate, was on a call with a tech founder that I advise, and I told him about my book. And as you know, AI, everybody is having these days. It's a term that maybe a year ago we wouldn't have even known, but everybody's playing around with it and talking about it and thinking it's scary or not scary, or how can it be used. And this fellow, unbeknownst to me, was working with some AI technology and experimenting, and he was peppering me with questions about my book, and I said, look, dude, I'll just send you my manuscript. Well, within 3 weeks, he had recruited some friends of his who were developers, and they had created a digital version of me called Ask Ellyn. She is the world's first conversational AI companion for breast cancer. She's non-medical, she's completely private, she's free, and will always be free, and she speaks every language. You can go and you can call her up on the phone right now and talk to her, askellyn.ai, and it's been pretty cool. And so, all of these things started to kind of converge. This learning I'd had in terms of working with the photo series and talking to women of different cultures and realizing that breast cancer is a shameful diagnosis. And then Ask Ellyn, which is this modern technology that then took my lived experience and embodied it in, it basically broke apart and brought my book to life. And so you can go and you can have a conversation with her. And I realized that for many women where breast cancer is a shameful diagnosis, where they're shut down from their own families in terms of talking about it, that Ask Ellyn may actually be the only person that they can go to for comfort and companionship. And so that just that keeps me going. I had a woman the other day reach out. So right now we've just marketed her through word of mouth. I founded a nonprofit called the Lindell Project after my dad. And my mission is that no one will walk alone. No one diagnosed will walk alone. So Ask Ellyn's just the beginning. I have a great ambition that this will be applied to other cancers and other diseases and other women's issues going forward. I'm in this, uncharted waters of running a nonprofit, which I've had absolutely no experience with, and fundraising and doing all of those sorts of things. So it's all a bit of a new journey for me. But I had a woman reach out the other day through the app, and she said, I was using your AI. I was unwrapping my bandages and looking at my scars for the very first time. And she said, I was asking your AI questions, and I realized we had a lot in common, and that we were very much the same type of person. And the thought of me being able to digitally stand in the bathroom with her and hold her hand as she went through this very, very vulnerable moment in her life was incredibly fulfilling. And so it just keeps me going. So I'm going to finish with a quote as I end, but this one is not Oprah. It's that life is a storm that will test. Don't wait for calm waters that may not arrive. Derive purpose from resilience and learn to sail on the raging sea. Thank you.